Good morning. Welcome to The Human Author. My name is Jen Cantwell, and today I'm working on the fifth book in my Light Chaser series, The Warning. I'm going to be reading what I did yesterday. If you have questions about the series, you can learn more about it at jbcantwell.com. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and read yesterday's work. A cold rush of shivers crawled across my skin. I looked around desperately, searching, at first thinking that Torrin himself was with us. Then I realized that his voice had been in my head, loud in my head. I looked up to the Wicks who were circling above, and I tried to determine which of them Torrin was using to communicate with me. More of them were starting to leave the castle and join the others above the stone wall. And soon there were no fewer than 8 of them hovering. I took a risk and yelled back at Kenneth and Brennen, "Let them take us! Trust me!" Kenneth stood bravely, waiting, but Brennen raced to my side, grabbing onto my arm. "We need to go! We need to get out of here! They'll kill us!" I pulled his fingers off my forearm and gripped his hand tightly in mine. "They won't," I said. "They won't kill you, but what about us? We're not important to him." Suddenly, the Wicks began to descend, reaching out for us. I had to ask, "You're not important to him, but you are important to me. That will be enough." I squeezed his hand, then released it and reached my own high above my head, waiting for them to take me. I didn't have to wait long. A moment later, one of them took my arms and another my legs, and without knowing or realizing what was still happening down on top of the wall, I was lifted into the air. Immediately, I began speaking to them in the only way I knew how. "We must go lower," I said. "Take the others as well." But my concentration was not enough, and instead of flying closer to the ground, the Wicks took me higher. I looked down, and while I was afraid to be so high above the ground, I was relieved to find that both Kenneth and Brennen had been picked up too. I let out a deep breath and tried to get my bearings. I closed my eyes. Concentrate. The Wick I'd been speaking with was the one holding Kenneth's hands. I tried another. The one holding my feet was who I tried next. "Tell the others to go low." I could feel the presence of Torrin in the Wick's mind, but Torrin did not answer. My heart leapt as I realized I might be able to trick him. "We must fly lower. It will get us back to Torrin faster." Suddenly, I felt the Wick pulling on my legs, wrapping his hands around my ankles and trying to do what I commanded. The other didn't receive my message, so I tried speaking to both of them at the same time. "Lower. Tell the others." Then it appeared Torrin had found me. "They will not listen to you. The Wicks belong to me. I have been their master for millennia. Trickery from a child such as yourself will not work." What ensued was a game of cat and mouse. It appeared that Torrin could only speak to me through one Wick at a time. I let my consciousness jump around, telling each Wick the same instructions. Every minute or so, Torrin would catch up with me, but I would quickly disappear again into a different Wick's mind. And slowly, we got closer to the ground. I couldn't try to attack them. We were still too high, but I gripped my staff in one hand, even though the Wick had me around my wrists. "Slower," I commanded. They must have been able to communicate, for once I gave one Wick a command, the others would follow suit. In each case, only one would wait. One would refuse to listen. In this, it was easy for me to determine which Wick was being possessed at which time. I continued to jump around, but then I made a wrong move and heard Torrin's voice again. "You cannot beat me. The time has come for you to join me. I've been waiting." Immediately, I jumped away, and I was delighted to find that we were almost close enough to the ground that if we were dropped, we would be unlikely to perish. I looked back to Kenneth and Brennen. "Get ready!" The ground was coming up fast, and the one Wick who had Torrin in mind was the only one trying to thwart the others. He flew around and around, but no matter what he did, he was unable to control the other 7. I was the one controlling them now. Still, I didn't stay in one place for too long. Jumping around through each of their minds, I commanded them to let us go. The ground was coming up fast. Didn't I just say that? And I knew the time was upon us. Drop us now! And suddenly they did. All three of us hit the ground hard, grunting, but I didn't hear any bones breaking. My head hurt from the fall, but it only took me a moment to raise my staff and send a curse up toward the closest wick. And that was all it took. One strong curse was enough to send him flying away from me, falling to the ground. Did that mean he was dead? I hit another one, and then one more who was grappling with Kenneth. That one was thrown backward, hitting a tree trunk with his back, then sliding down to the earth, dead, as far as I could tell. The others began to fly away, but they didn't go far. I continued to throw curses, and while it was enough to confuse some of them, most of them stayed hovering above us, seemingly unsure of what to do. I was a shield between us and the wicks, and I was just in time, too, for they were gathering once again, and I could only imagine that Torin's voice was the one echoing through their heads now. I didn't quit. I kept trying to knock them out of the sky, and a couple of them did take direct hits. In the end, when Kenneth, Brennen, and I ran to each other, turning our backs to each other so that we were ready to fight as a unit, there were only 4 of them left. I didn't know what it was Torin was saying to them, but one thing was clear: not have access to my mind. I wondered why. It could be a bad thing, not being able to hear his thoughts. But then again, the reverse was also true. It appeared we were on a level playing ground. This thought was strange to me, the idea that Torin and I might be equally matched. Maybe not equally matched, but equally unable to hear what the other one is thinking. I reached out again, searching for any of the 4, squeezing my eyes shut with determination. But as they fire, their thoughts became muddled, and I was unable to gain access again. Bree, Kenneth said, are you okay? I'm fine. Brennen, what about you? Do we need light? No, he said, and it became obvious that he was gasping, probably crying. You did great, I said. Don't give up now. Brennen stood up taller, wiping his face with the back of his hand. Good, I said. What do we do now? Kenneth asked. He looked up. My gaze followed his, sticking to the 4 remaining wicks who flew too high for me now. I don't think they can get at us, I said, but Torin is giving them instructions. I could hear it in my head. Kenneth looked at me in disbelief. You mean you did it? It worked? When I thought we were in the clear for a few moments, I turned to look at him, and I couldn't help but smile a little. I think it did, for now, but he'll be able to follow us. But he's not here? How will he follow us? Brennan asked. He's possessing them too. He can use them, see us through them. Suddenly, my smile disappeared. But we're out, Kenneth said. That's saying something. Your idea worked. I can't believe it. I smirked, then punched him on the arm. For a moment, I wondered if I might see that same playful look on his face that I'd seen so often as a child. But no, he didn't offer me a smile. I wondered what might be necessary to tease one out of him. That might be true, I said, but he knows where we are. Hopefully we can find somewhere to hide before he appears. I was starting to wonder why Torin himself was never present. What was it about him that made him unwilling to have a face-to-face audience with me? Surely it couldn't be fear, could it? I was willing to bet that between the 2 of us, I was the most likely coward. But was that really true? Suddenly, a joyous thought filled my head. Maybe it didn't matter that he knew where we were. As long as we did not allow ourselves to become captured, we might just have a fighting chance. I thought back to the prophecy the tortoise had told me so many months before. A girl had made it, had predicted that someone like me would be the one to take Torin out of power. Maybe it would just be a matter of staying in one place and waiting for him to show up. But then another thought encroached upon the first. There was that terrible book with my name scrawled in the back in blood red ink. It wasn't a game at all. For whatever reason, it had been predicted that I would be the one. But there was a difference between a prediction and being chosen. In this way, the tortoise had it wrong, and maybe I'd had it wrong along myself. I turned to the others. I think we should get moving. I looked nervously up at the sky. I wondered when I might get a chance at them again. Perhaps Torin would send reinforcements. Then I would have my hands full once more. I wondered how many of them I would have to kill. But no matter. They were little more than shells of men, their consciousness completely overrun by their evil master. Maybe if I were able to take enough of them down, it would weaken him. It would certainly put a damp on his ability to communicate. Maybe that would be enough. Kenneth looked determined, but Brennen was still clearly scared. I switched hands on my staff, then took his in the other. We will be okay, I said, and I was starting to believe it. The sun rose, the sun sank, and on we walked. It seemed pointless to only walk at night now when we had already been discovered. For whatever reason, no more of the Wicks appeared. Apparently, Torin was just paying attention to our location, not striking. I wondered why. We took turns watching over each other while we slept. I was the most important defense, but we all needed rest. Each day we consumed one vial of light, and though I wanted nothing more than to curse Kenneth and take the rest of it, the logical side of me understood that it was best to have him carry it. On our second day away from the kingdom, I found myself shaken awake, and I sat bolt upright, searching for the threat. Kenneth put on my shoulder, looking up at the sky. He pointed. Something has changed, he said. Brennen looked worried, sitting up and rubbing his eyes. What is it? He asked. It was true. Up above the Wicks were circling, coming closer than they had in the past couple of days. I wondered what Torin had up his sleeve, and it seemed strange for him to pick a fight now. But there was no way around it. They were descending upon us. I stood up, grabbing my staff from the dirt and aimed closest to them. I sent a curse up into the air, easily hitting one of them and watching as he fell to the ground. Check him, I said to Kenneth. He ran over to where a cloak lay in the grass, then turned to me with a frown. There's nothing here. Where did he go? But I didn't have time to answer. They were coming down fast now, and I fortified our shield. I sent up several bolts, aiming at any and all of them. I didn't have time to try to speak to them, only to make my attempts lives, if one could call them alive at all. By anyone's account, it was a slaughter. The next two came down easily, and apparently it was enough to scare the last of them. He flew up high, suddenly on the run. But I was angry, and I kept trying for him. The farther away he got, the more difficult he was to hit. But after he seemed too far for me to manage it, one of my curses surprisingly hit home. He was far enough now that it was hard for me to tell which part of his body I'd hit, but his fall was dramatic. Clearly, he was not mortally wounded. As he flew around erratically, seemingly trying to keep himself aloft. Finally, as I stood back and ended my attack, he fell to the ground. Check the others, I yelled. I didn't take my eyes off the place on the horizon where he'd fallen. We would need to check him, too. Kenneth yelled out his affirmation. They're gone. All three of them. What do we do about the fourth? He ran back to us, face concerned. It was only then that I realized my breathing was heavy. Had I been holding my breath this whole time? He's that way, I said, pointing. Well, let's go get him, Brennen said. I put my hand on my chest, bending over and holding up my forefinger, asking for a moment. Slowly, my breath came back to me, and I realized the success I'd just had. But there was always another. There was always Torin waiting behind behind his slaves that he sent out to fight his battle for him. We would have to be careful. Finally, when my breathing stabilized, I spoke. Let's go find him now while we still can. This could easily be a trap. Be on the look for anything strange. So that was the first part of chapter 13, and I will be finishing that up today. Thank you for joining me. If you have any questions about The Human Author, you can email me at jen@thehumanauthor.com. Have a great rest of your morning. See you tomorrow.